you so much for being here today. I'm here to get us started. My name is Liz Solkin, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Sustainability Laboratories Conversation Series. I'm so excited for you to be joining us today. This is our 22nd conversation of this series that was launched in 2021 to explore global, systemic approaches to the challenge of sustainability with the leading edge thinkers of our time. An archive of these conversations can be found on the lab's website. Tonight, it's my very special privilege to introduce to you First Nations Bruce Shillingsworth, a Muruwari and Budjiti elder from Australia. He represents the ancient tradition of his Indigenous community. Bruce is a fierce activist and a voice for the rights of water, land, and people from all walks of life. With a deep-seated commitment to environmental justice and community well-being, Bruce has dedicated his life to addressing the profound challenges faced by Indigenous communities. As a cultural educator, he shares invaluable insights from First Nations traditions, offering profound guidance on nurturing and healing our shared Mother Earth. Bruce's impact extends far beyond his hometown. He's a beacon of knowledge and inspiration, educating audiences across Australia on the rich tapestry of First Nations history and the imperative of sustainable living. Alongside his son, Bruce pioneered innovative approaches to community cohesion, establishing the inaugural independent tribal law reinforcement system in Engonnia and Bourke, New South Wales. There's so much more that I could say, but I'm going to turn it over to the founding director of the Sustainability Laboratory, Dr. Michael Ben-Eli, to continue the conversation. Hi, Michael.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Nicole, for being behind the scene. Thank you, Maya, for making this session possible. And of course, thank you, Bruce, for being here with us. It's really a very special occasion for us. And what we'd like to do today is to explore with you how, being aware of all the challenges, the sustainability challenges that are engulfing us today, we'd like to explore with you how Indigenous wisdom can help us restore sanity on the planet and get us to a better place with the Earth. So before we start, maybe, and after this introduction that we had with Liz, maybe a more personal few words from you, if you can introduce yourself to our audience, if you can tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, milestones in your development, important inspiration, influences, key events, mentors, what made you who you are today? Please.
My name's Bruce Shillingsworth. My traditional name, my tribal name is Mundagara, meaning rainbow snake. But first of all, before we like to start, I would like to acknowledge the space we're in. I would like to acknowledge the land in which we're on. I want to acknowledge my elders, both past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, the tradition, the culture, and the hope for the original people of this land. We must always remember that under this concrete and stone, this is and always will be the original people's land. And acknowledging also Mother Earth and its creation and the Creator. Yeah, look, suppose going back to the beginning, I come from a little town called Engonnia. It's got a population of 100 people, very small. My mother was born there under a tree, just like our people did for thousands of years. We lived on the riverbank in an old tin shack. We've lived on the river, got water, no running water, no electricity. We lived off the bush structure, we lived off the land. And there was only a primary school, so I had to get sent away to school in Sydney to go to high school. My mother's instruction to me was, you got to go away, son, to get an education. Now, education is the key, she said. You have to go away to get an education, you'll be able to do something for your people and for your environment, for the land. So she sent me away to high school, and I went through the year 12 and done my high school certificate. And then I went back home to do a little bit. And look at that all. I think being around a lot of our elders and a lot of our leaders in communities, especially those that fought for justice, fought for the rights of First Nations people, you've seen a lot of injustice and a lot of stuff that's going on with the government and with the environment. And that's what started to get me interested in a lot of things. And it was lucky that we had First Nation leaders there that are activists and stood up for what was right. And it's still happening today. And so that's what got me into a lot of the stuff, and seeing the damages what done to my environment, to our rivers, to our bush tucker, to our medicines, and all that stuff that we relied on. So then I got myself into activism, a bit of an activist now for the environment, fighting for the environment and rivers, mainly the rivers. We come off the rivers. We're river people. Along our rivers, the great Darling Murray River that runs through the 4 states. It got 48 nations or tribes that live along there, which is so important. Over the many years, the 230 plus years now, the devastation and destruction we see are not getting any better. So it's time that we get some voices out there that we need to be heard. Get that information out, not just to here in Australia, but across the world. And the water issue is not just here, it's all over the globe. First Nations feeling in other countries, non-Indigenous people, farmers are now being infected. But look, at a small age, I've been introduced to a lot of that stuff. My family, my people have been infected, so we'll talk about that later on, a bit of the stuff. And then when I moved to Sydney, I got involved in a lot of the protest rallies and, starting to speak up for our rights and stuff. And that's where it all started. You
mentioned I've seen in some of your other places that your mother has been a big inspiration to you. It's interesting that quite a few of our guests have said the same thing. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, look, my mother, like I said, she was born under a tree out on the edge of the desert. And my mum lived till 101. Now, that's very important. Why did she live till 101? Her mother, which is my grandmother, lived till 104. Now, my wife's great-grandmother lived till 108. Now, that tells us something. Now, Mum lived off the land. She walked, she knew the land, she read the land, she got her medicine from the land, she got her food from the land. She knew how to survive. And I think all those natural food that she ate kept her alive and healthy, just like her mother and her generation. So that's big important for us today, because a lot of our people are now dying young. Why are they dying young? There's a reason why they're dying young, because of the food we eat, our environment, and we'll explain that a little bit more later on. And I think that's Mum was a role model for all of us, and I think we should take a leaf out of her book and say, look, well, if she lived a healthy life and a long, long time, I think we need to look at a lot of the stuff that she benefit from and that she included in her life.
Fantastic. Now,
but she was a very strong lady.
I understand it's basically accepted that the Aboriginal people in Australia have been there for over 50 or 60,000 years. Maybe you can familiarize us a little bit with the historical context, the people, the society, the tradition, the way of life, and so on.
So as you know, First Nations people have been living on this continent of Australia for over 80,000 years. 80,000 years of wisdom and knowledge. We've lived and sustained in our environment. 500 plus nations across the great continent of ours. They all weren't the same. They was completely different. There's over 250 different language groups. Not all the same. So my neighbouring tribe or neighbouring group, nation, wouldn't speak the same language. We've done our own dances, our own music, our own songs. All those things were completely different. On the East Coast, to the West Coast, to the North, to the South, all completely different environments. So we had our own laws, we had our own ritual, we had our own ceremonies, we had our own language, which was made us unique. I mean, if you look at Europe today, Europe made up of a lot of countries. Same here in Australia. You know, you talk about multiculturalism, it was here in Australia for a long, long time. So we've lived in our environment. So the natural borders were our the nature, the rivers, the lakes, the mountains, bordering. We knew where our borders was, so they were the natural borders. We lived in that area. We weren't allowed to go into someone else's territory or someone else's land. We would have big punishment, and we would have been disciplined. But we had our connections through our song lines, through our dance, through our music. When we get our gatherings together and the nations and tribes would come together, we would share that. And within our clan groups, we'd have our elders, men and women, would sit around the circle, and they would make law, and they would make decisions for the village or for the camp or for the nations. And that's what we were run by the elders, and they were special people in our life, and that's why we paid a lot of respect, because they taught us and they passed down their wisdom and knowledge to us. And I was grateful to do that, have that in my life. And I think, and educating us about how to survive in the environment, how to look after nature, how to look after the birds, the animals, the rivers, the oceans, everything was vital to sustain us. We lived in an environment that sustained us. And if you look what happened over the last 230 years, there's a big change, and we'll discuss that later on. But I think we lived in a society that was next to perfect, because our Creator, which placed us there and gave us our laws and our language and everything.
This brings us to the next. Maybe you can teach us a little bit about some key aspects of the traditional ethics and mythology. I'm really fascinated by the concept of the dream time, of course, and the position of humans, the people in the cosmos, the totems, and what they symbolize and so forth. Go deep into that. It's really very interesting to explore that.
Yeah, and I'll give you a couple of examples too. But look, we live with Mother Earth. We're people of nature, and we live very, very close with nature, and that was so important. And nature also has a spiritual access, spiritual aspects. So, through our ceremonies, through our stuff that we do, connecting our spiritual world and the natural world. But what connected us, the 500 plus nation, is our totem system. Now, our totem system was the belief that if my totem is a kangaroo, I weren't allowed to kill the kangaroo, and I weren't allowed to eat the kangaroo. So every individual, every family group, clan group, or tribe had a totem. Your totem might have been a koala. So your responsibility was to look after the koala, to make sure that the koala doesn't disappear. So that was about sustainability. So if you look right across the great continent, every individual had a responsibility. We had a responsibility to keep those animals or every living thing alive, so it wouldn't become extinct. And our stories, like my father's nation, which is Muruwari, we are known as the rainmakers, special rainmakers. When we go out to perform or do our ceremonies, we make it rain. Right? And the rainmakers were set in certain parts of Australia, just like all the other special needs and stuff that happened all across the continent. So we were called upon to do the rainmaking when there's big droughts and where there's needed rain. So, and a lot of those stuff now have stopped now right across the continent because of colonization, because of assimilation, and that's what we want to try to get back. We'll talk about that later on. But our connection through our songs, through our dance, through our songline. Now, my mother's totem is the rainbow snake, the Munagata. Now, the Munagata is a rainbow snake. He lives in the water. He lives in the underground basin. He lives in the creek. He lives in the oceans. He lives in all the waterways. Now, that story connects us right across the central Australia to the Arunta tribe. It goes north to the Kimberleys, to the top of Australia, the Northern Territory, and then it goes east to Cape York, the top of Queensland. And it comes down the east coast. So that story goes in a different songline. And that's only one song, one story, right? One story. But if you look at all the other stories, they crisscross across this great continent of ours. And that's what connected us. And that's what sustained us in our environment, because we had a lot of respect for Mother Earth. Mother Earth is our mother. It looks after us. It gives us our bed. It gives us our food. It gives us our medicine. So that was so important to us and to us today. And not just here, but all Indigenous people right across the world. And slowly we're trying to introduce that, and we're trying to bring the non-Indigenous people back to Mother Earth to build that relationship, because it's been lost. But now we've got to bring it back into play because it's so vital and so important for us all. You see, the animals and the birds and the trees, they got their own law. Law, they got their own law. That's what we've got to start to respect. Our law, L-O-R-E, needs to be respected. So we're going to look at nature, the universe, and its law. We're going to look at Creator's law, natural law. They're all important and play a vital part here. Every individual has a responsibility. And that's what happened in our tribes and in our nation.
Can you refer to that concept of dream time at the origin of things?
Well, the dream time is a story that's been passed down through generations. Our dream time stories come from our Creator. You call it God, some call it God, some call it whoever, but we call it the Creator that created the creation of the world we live in. Mother Earth, nature. And those stories that have been passed down through generations are still there today, are so valuable. It's got your wisdoms in there, it's got your stories of how you live with each other, how to survive on the land, how to treat each other, how to treat the environment. All those lessons are there in those Dreamtime stories. Those creation stories. And they're still continuing today. When we talk about the Dreamtime, we talk about the past, we talk about the present, and we talk about the future. It all lies in those.
Let's get for a minute about this. What in view are the most critical aspects of the forced adaptation to modern economic and social reality? What have been the impacts on the ecosystem, on people, both young and old, on the tradition itself, and the general well-being of everyone?
Look, my old mother said, there's no plan B here. There's only one planet we all live on, right? We cannot go nowhere else. We only can live on this planet, but it's time that we come together and work out our solutions and how to look after Mother Earth and live as one big family. But if you look what happened over the last 230-something years here in Australia, a lot of the land have been destroyed. A lot of the lands have been cleared. A lot of our rivers are now polluted. A lot of the air we breathe is polluted. A lot of the food we eat are now toxic, right? And that's only happened over the last 230-something years. So we need to change here. And our people are dying young. It's affecting our environment. It's affecting our people that are living on the land. It's affecting the farmers as well. But if you look at the greed, capitalism, the big investors, overseas investors that are now buying up the land, buying up the rivers, buying up the farm, buying everything now, are starting to kill my country, killing our nation.
You've been very outspoken about issues of water and water rights, water being the thing that connects all life. Maybe you can elaborate on that aspect of the impact a little more.
Look, water is life. Water gives everything life. No one owns the water. No one owns the water. The water is ours. It's all of us, right? Now, what happens upstream, it affects the people downstream. And that's what's happening here. Upstream, top of Australia, what's going on there and affecting the people downstream. Now, without water, nothing survives. If we've got a sick river, we've got a sick community. If we've got a dead river, we've got a dead community. So water gives life to the aquatic life, it gives life to the animals, the birds, the environment, to our trees, all those sorts of things, our medicine. If that disappears, brother, we're all gone. Now, for a while here in Australia, our rivers have been dried up. How do you bring back the 50-year-old cods? How do you bring back the long-necked turtles? How do you bring back the mussels? How do you bring back the aquatic life that lived in the river system for thousands of years? You know, our bush medicines, our plants that were grown along the riverbanks in those areas where the river lie, they're completely gone. Where do we go to get our medicine? Where do we go to get our food, our fruits, nuts and berries that grows on those trees when it's gone? Completely dead. So like I say, if you take away the water, you take away our rivers and oceans and waterways, you can say we might as well cut our throats, because that's what's happening. And everyone's gone. So what they're trying to do is move everything up, move all our communities off, or take the people off their traditional land. But we'll discuss that again in the next couple of questions. A lot of the big cotton farmers, you know, cotton, almonds, walnuts and rice should never be grown in Australia. Australia's an arid country. Why are we wasting our water on those big on flats and plains? Why are our people, a big corporation, are damming a lot of our water, stopping it from coming down to our country, coming down to our nations? Why are they allowed to do that? Where is First Nations rights to water? We all have a right to water. Where's First Nations rights? That's what we're trying to say.
You had a clip you wanted to show about the river situation. Is it the right moment now?
Yeah, I think it's the right moment to put it on.
Are you listening? Can you hear her crying? We've got to pull together, stop the greed and the lies. If we don't, this country dies. If we don't, we won't survive. No time for crying. Gotta get strong. The river has no voice, and she's losing her song. Country's got a heartbeat. Can you feel it now? All together and sing it loud. Save the rivers, brothers and sisters. Are you listening? Can you hear her crying? Gotta pull together, stop the greed and the lies. If we don't, this country dies. If we don't, we won't survive. Water is life, blood of a mother earth. Water is life, it connects us all. We're singing our country, bringing down the rain. The rivers flow free again. Save the rivers, brothers and sisters. Are you listening? Can you give it back to the river. What do you say? Save the river, brothers and sisters. Are you listening? Can you hear her crying? We've got to pull together, stop the greed and the lies. If we don't, this country dies. If we don't, we won't survive. Yamagana baka, Yamagana baka, Yamagana baka.
Great, Bruce. Would you like to comment on this? A few words?
Yeah, just let me elaborate on that. Now, that was a journey we took in 2018. Now, the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, which is the state authority that's supposed to protect our rivers. Now, they were given $300 million in the year 2000 to put water back in our rivers and to fix our rivers. Now, 2018, which is 18 years later, the rivers were still completely dry. Right? That was because of the corporations and the greed that they was taking the water. Now, and it's a bit part of the drought as well. They're all contributed. Now, we took a convoy from Sydney. We had 300 people on a convoy. We went to 5 communities: Brewarrina, Bourke, Engonnia, and Menindee. And we said the only way to do it is to bring our First Nations people together and do our ceremonies and do our dance along the rivers and sing the spirit of the land. And so we've invited all the dancers, the nations across New South Wales to come together with us to join us on the rivers. We had 1,000 people on the river each night in those 5 communities. Now, we finished down in Menindee Lakes. The Menindee Lakes were dry. They've never been dried in their lifetime. So we went down to Menindee. We got an old bloke that come up from the Coorong, where the river, the Murray River, runs out into the ocean. We asked that group to come up and join us at Menindee. And we performed there at the dry riverbed, dry lake beds. We had 1,000 people. That night, when we done the last dance, rain fell from the sky. 1,000 people witnessed this. There was no cloud in the sky. And ever since we had the 2019 Corroboree, the Yamagana Festival, the rivers have never stopped flowing. We had the biggest rain in New South Wales ever. And guess what? It cost us nothing. So there you go. And I said, the answer lies with First Nations people. If we're going to go back and do our ceremony like we did for thousands and thousands of years, it shows that it works. So I think somewhere along the line, we've got to incorporate First Nation wisdom and knowledge and ceremonies into whatever we do here on this continent.
Let's go on to explore something else. I mean, there are obviously 2 very different worldviews here. The worldview of the current industrial civilization and the indigenous experience. Could you talk a little bit about the contrast between the 2, the difference? Because that difference, of course, brings about the results that we see.
Yeah, so here's the issue. We've got a Western society and we've got First Nations, right? So First Nation people are the people of the land. Now, non-Indigenous people are in it for commerce and trade, right? In nature, and whatever they do, they put a $sign to everything, right? They put the $sign. They put $1 to it. So it's about business. It's commerce and trade. Now, That's the difference. You know, it's a part of that construct, that Western construct is a part of the destructions of our Mother Earth. It's a destruction of our environment. I'll give you one example. If you look at the east coast of Australia, the developing, right? The housing, infrastructures, all that things are happening on the east coast of Australia. Now, we also got the Great Dividing Range on the east coast of Australia. Now, my people, my country, the river people that lives on the western side of the Great Divide are being affected. Let me tell you how. If you look on the other side of the Great Dividing Range, the clearing of the land, the farming that's taking place for hundreds of kilometres have stopped the rain from coming to my country. You see, the vegetation and the plants hold in the moisture. And what we're trying to say is, once you remove that, it upsets the environment, it upsets the weather pattern. And that's what it's done here. So what we're saying is, you've got to put back nature the way it was. The plants are so important. Why are we cutting down our trees? Our trees give us oxygen. That's our survival. If we can't breathe oxygen, we aren't alive. So we've got to start putting back nature the way it was. Now, all the greed and the corporations and the overseas investors that are buying up our lands, are buying up our rivers without the consent of the people and First Nations people, are being affected. All right? Your big cotton farmers, your big agriculture, those that have got big dams. You look up on the Queensland border here, New South Wales and Queensland, there's a place called Cubby Station. Cubby Station has got dams that hold more water than the Sydney Harbour.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who owns Cubby Station? Macquarie Banks. Right? And if you look at Macquarie Banks, Prince Charles got something to do with it. So look what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a government that's controlled by corporations, that's controlled by the big business, mining companies, agriculture, coal, gas, and all those resources. First Nations people are saying that they've got to be left in the ground. They're there for a purpose, never to be dug up. Why are we digging it up and destroying the land? It's about greed. It's greed. Now, that wealth from those resources from our land does not go back into our community. It does not go back into First Nations community. And this has been going on for so long. It's still happening until we put a stop to it. Well, what we need to see is First Nation people making decisions here. 80,000 years of wisdom and knowledge need to come into play here. First Nations people have a voice. First Nation people have been living on the land since day dot. So they know the land. They know the waterways. They know everything. So what we need to do, First Nation people need to sit down with this government or whoever involved to say, hey, enough's enough. We're going to do it this way. We're going to do it the proper way. But we've got to come together and work together as a partnership.
Yeah.
We've got to come to some agreement. We're going to make an agreement that these resources has to be done properly. And the wealth has to be distributed equally across this continent. So what we need to do is set up a First Nations committee or a governance working alongside our Australian government or whoever involved that protects our waters, like national parks and stuff like that. need to be working with First Nations. And money, allocations and funding need to be allocated in those areas.
Let's go back to explore some more aspects of the tradition. And I think that ceremonies, the role of rituals and ceremonies have been so important in cementing the connection between people to other people, between people and the environment, between people and the ecosystem, between humans and the cosmos. Can you tell us a little bit about the indigenous rituals and ceremonies, some examples, and how they serve their purpose?
Yeah, look, we live in a great circle of life. Every living organism has a part to play, especially us. Now, we are not only connected to nature through our physical body, but through the spiritual stuff as well, and through our soul. So, like I said before, every plant, animal, and living stuff has a spirit, and that's what we're going to connect us. It's all about respect. We're going to bring respect back into play here. It's going to come back to managing our resources. You know, we've got to talk. When we go out to do our stuff, our ceremonies, we've got to talk to those trees. We've got to talk to the rivers. We've got to talk to the land. See?
Yep.
When we go into someone else's territory, we're going to be welcome. So when we go into nature, we also got to be welcomed. We've got to be welcomed by those birds, by those animals, by the rivers, by the mountains, and all those things. You see? If we're not welcome, brother, we got to get out of it. Mother Earth is now speaking. Mother Earth is now speaking to all of us. Mother Earth was here before us. Mother Earth will be here when we leave. So we got to be, we got to be caring. We're going to put in programs that'll care for our lands, care for our rivers and waterways. We're going to put policies and law in place that'll protect Mother Earth. Our rivers have their own identity. Those rivers should be run freely. Our mountains, our forests, all those things has to be protected. We've got to coexist with nature. The more development, the more we cut down the environment and destroy it, it's finished. In Australia alone, our animals are becoming extinct. Why? Because of man and what they're doing. So we've got to do something about that, because they play a role in our life and our survival as well. But getting back to ceremony, and that's why we have our ceremonies on our land. We dance up when we stamp our feet. We bring the energy there that's out there, that's in play. When we do it in Australia here, First Nation people are doing it all over the world, and that's connecting up to the energy that's going around the globe. What happened when it stops?
Mm.
The energy becomes destroyed, right? So that's what we got to do. Those good karma, the things that are happening out there, spiritually, we need to start working on it. Because there is a spiritual world out there. There is a place called Mother Earth. There is nature. And without it, we wouldn't survive. We do those ceremonies across this good big continent of ours. Like I said, our totems, our song lines that connect, crisscross, across this country is alive. And we're going to bring that back into play again.
So what in your view, or how can this indigenous experience and knowledge, how can it being brought to bear on the whole transformative challenge that we have on the planet now? How can we elevate consciousness, making the concept of sustainability an organizing principle on the planet? How can the indigenous wisdom be brought to bear more effectively than we have now as two separate cultures? How can we merge and bring it together more effectively?
Well, we've got to bring it together. And like I said in the very early part of this conversation, that education is the key. Now, here in Australia, for over 230-something years, that's been ignored. Our education system have never engaged First Nation knowledge and wisdom. So number one, that's need to change. The other answer is we need to get together more often. We need to take non-Indigenous people out on the land and teach them our way. Not Eurocentric way, but teach them our way, First Nations way. They've got to sit with us on the rivers, around the campfire, in our ceremonies, learn our songs. And that's another big thing that needs to happen. So we've got to educate each other. And then we've got to start to strategize and implement it with the technology we've got and all the other resources. We need to bring that together to build a better environment, a better world we live in. But you see, we all got a part of this puzzle. We've all got a part of the puzzle. We've got to put that into place. And I believe that First Nation knowledge and wisdom is one part of that puzzle. And non-Indigenous need to sit down and listen to First Nations people. Start to include First Nation people in all the decision-making on this land, not just here, but around the globe.
Has there been, can you provide us some example of successful collaboration between Indigenous communities and government and industry, and highlight the factors that led to positive outcomes?
Let me tell you something. I'm an educator, right? I work in schools here in Sydney. Now, when we take our kids out, sit them in nature, we start teaching them about the thing that we've learned that have been passed down for years to us. Now, we tell them kids that, look, you might only learn this amount of history. What about this? The 40,000 years of history. That's what need to be included. Now, when we look at the kangaroos, right? When we know the kangaroos are not having joeys or having babies, we know there's going to be a big drought. We know when we look at the trees, when the ants are climbing the trees, we know there's going to be a big rain or big flood. When we look at a certain flower and it blossoms, we know that there's whales coming up the coast. When we look at the emu in the sky, the Milky Way, we know the emus are laying eggs. When we look at the moon, we know when it's going to rain and when it's not going to rain. So you tell me, where do you find that education or that wisdom and knowledge? It's only in First Nation. So we need to implement that in all systems of education, even in universities. So it's slowly working. You know, you look at the fire stick farming, when they go and burn, Aboriginal people used to burn the land off, right? During the winter time, before the big rain. And after the rain comes, the plants start to grow and they start to blossom, right? That was a part of sustaining our food source. You look at a lot of the Australian now fire brigades has introduced that into their system. So they're working with First Nations people to actually do the burning off at certain times of the year, and then it gets the regrowth after the winter season. So that's a good example of how we work together. You see? And that's why you get the big bushfires, brother. because the fuel build up, and then when the fire goes through, that's it. But First Nation people had control of that. Control. So that's what we need to do. Start controlling, start working together, start doing things together. You know, and we also got technology now that can help us to be able to do that. These simple things, even in farming, even in the water flows in the rivers and the mountain, all those things that takes play here. Cutting certain trees, introducing, feral animals or feral stuff, that's got to stop.
Maybe something related to the previous question is what can be done to strengthen the connection, the integration of indigenous wisdom and current science that is very fragmented and going into ever more specialization rather than understanding the totality, the comprehensiveness of the whole, as you express it. How can we marry, so to speak, those two different ways of knowing?
Well, all we got to look, it's about coming together. It's about working together. It's about a collective now. Scientists has to sit down with First Nation elders in those communities, right, in those environments, to be able to work on sustainability, to be able to work on, building, putting those nature back the way it was. There's a reason why the mountains over there. There's a reason why the rivers over there. There's a reason why the trees over there. So those are the things we've got to start to sit down and talk about. They're so important. But if we don't come together, it's all about inclusiveness. It's about at a high level or the government level or state level or local level, bring the wisdom and knowledge into play. Like I said, we've got to put the law in place. We've got to put policy in place to make sure that these things are happening. And we've got to make sure that scientists or whoever has to start working with First Nations people.
So we are getting to the hour, and before we open to questions, I was wondering whether in closing, in a few words, what message would you send on behalf of your First Nation people to the world?
Look, there's no plan B. We can't go nowhere else. We've got to live together on this planet. And we've got to look at the future. It's about our children. It's about my children, it's about your children, and it's about their children's children. What world are we building for our next generation? I'm in it because of my children and their children's children. We've got to build a more safer, a much peaceful environment, a much peaceful world for all of us. And I think we've all got something to contribute. So if we all contribute, we'll make it a better earth, better environment for all of us. So it's about us not giving up. We just got to keep chipping away. But we've got to work as a collective. And our ancient prophecy said that in the end days, all tribes, nations, and tongues are going to come together. I can see that now. It's happening. And that's a start. We've got to listen to Mother Earth. We've got to live on Mother Earth. And we've got to protect Mother Earth. So my freedom lies in your freedom lies in my freedom. But we've got to remember that there's only one Mother Earth that sustains us, that sustains all of us. Our DNA come from those rivers, come from the land, come from the food we eat. Think about it. So we all have a part to play. And I think we're on a journey now. We've got our challenges, but look, we will reach our destinations.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. And really so many thanks to you, Bruce, for doing this with us. It's been very important to add this conversation to the others that we had. It's another dimension, very important one. and that question of how to really understand the deep wisdom of Indigenous communities and how to be able to introduce it to our life is so very important. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Maya. And bye-bye. Have a nice day, evening, morning, wherever you are. Bye.